Five Nights at Freddy's. If you haven't heard about this game, you're either above the age of 30 or you've been living under a rock for the past decade. This is a game that has shaped the gaming industry and it's become its own cultural icon, creating the childhood of millions. However, these past few years, I've noticed a massive shift in the direction this franchise has taken. Back in 2021, I remember being severely disappointed after playing Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. The horror aspect wasn't there were so many bugs, and the ending was just so sloppy. After that, Ruin came out, and although it was better, the story the game was taking was something that I really disliked. It was different than what I had loved over so many years. And then this year, Secret of the Mimic came out, and yeah, the game was actually a good game, but it just wasn't FNAF. It just didn't capture the same essence that it had been doing for the past decade. And this is a theme that I've been seeing in a lot of the things around me. It's why I started this channel in the first place. Any things that I used to love, that were fun, that were innovative, things that had me looking forward to them, that feeling has faded away because of what those things have become now. So today I'm going to do a shallow dive into why Five Nights at Freddy's isn't the same anymore. I have 4 points that I'm going to go over this short video. Number 1, what was so great about the original FNAF games? Number 2, where did this shift happen? 3, what is so bad about the essence of the games now? And 4, why did this happen? So, what made classic FNAF so effective? Since this is a short video, I'll focus on just a few core elements that made the original FNAF games so effective, not individually, but together. Let's start with the environment. Just pay attention to some of these clips.
Good night.
Great.
One of the first things you notice when playing the game is how limited you are. You can't run, you can't hide, you can't escape. Your only option is to play the game and play it well. Otherwise, you're dead. The lack of movement is a crucial game element. It creates helplessness, and helplessness is the strongest tool in horror. Now, having movement isn't a bad mechanic on its own, but when you remove restriction, you remove tension. And when tension disappears, fear weakens. The original FNAF games understood that there's a sense of fear when you're trapped and not chased, but this mechanic wouldn't be nearly as effective without what supported it, such as the sound design. Sound design is what makes those environments feel alive. Every sound that FNAF presented carried meaning. The mechanical movements, the breathing of the monster in the hallway, or the eerie attractions in the background that played while you were in the restaurant. The sound was used to create a sense of dread. In other ways, Scott used the perfect sounds when telling us the lore itself. The sound would tell the story, hinting at the tragedies that occurred there long ago. From FNAF 1 to 6, sound wasn't just atmosphere, it was narrative. You could feel something was wrong before you ever saw it, and that fear becomes even stronger when paired with what you're looking at. The visuals completed the illusion of fear. Every location was dark, run down, had artificial lighting with no source of sunlight and grainy texture, giving no sense of hope to the player. These places felt abandoned during the night. Booting up the game for the first time, you had no idea where their danger was. What made it more disturbing was the contrast. These places were meant for children, cheerful, colorful, and happy during the day. But you're not there during the day, and this is why the argument that FNAF relies on jump scares misses the point. On their own, jump scares are very cheap, but FNAF use aspects of real fear building up the jump scare. The knowing you're in an abandoned location with no one else, the creepy sounds, the sounds of movements in the vents, and being helpless, completely unable to stop it. That's what made the jump scares so scary. The culmination of these effects would enhance the sense of dread and fear that you're feeling. Speaking of meaning, the main reason FNAF was a huge hit was because of its lore. FNAF's lore was purposeful. The reason it was so good was because of the emotion each part of the story conveyed. Sure, the lore was always very convoluted, but the small details that Scott was putting in each part gave the characters a lot of depth. The animatronics weren't just murder-made robots, they're poor lost souls, suffering for so many years, remembering nothing except the horrific act that was done to them. This motivation is something that the new games have been missing. Even William Afton, he's this mysterious, sick killer, but he's human, and that's what makes him so scary more than a simple ghost or a robot. Scott was actively working on giving these characters depth through intricate details. And not only that, but Scott was actively involved with the community, sharing teasers or hiding information in source code or just communicating through Steam posts or Reddit. Scott really cared about this community, and he listened to the feedback that was given to him. When FNAF 3 lacked in the horror aspect, he revamped it to make sure that no one said the same about his next game. When a lot of people missed the hints that he left in FNAF 4, he made the story much more clear in FNAF's sister location. Scott kept moving the story forward. He would give hints as to what happened in the past, and each hint felt like a story on its own, which is part of the larger narrative. The main story was essentially simple. Sure, hindsight is 2020, but when something new was introduced other than FNAF 4, it didn't feel like core parts of the narrative were being completely changed. And the story itself wasn't too convoluted. We only had the games and some of the books to worry about then. The motivation of the characters, the depth that they've been given, human personability that these characters have, and an eerie narrative is what made the game's essence so rich. It wasn't only fun just to solve the lore, but also to complete the challenge of the game itself while you found clues. And that's the fourth thing that made these games so good. There was a challenge. Yes, every night was repetitive, but the difficulty factor made it more satisfying to reach the end. Even FNAF's sister location, which lacks replayability, saved itself by introducing a custom night and giving rewards to those that completed them. The challenges of the games kept the hype going because people wanted to see who was going to be able to beat them and what secret lay behind it. The combination of the environment, the lore, and the challenge that the original series presented is what made the game so rich and memorable, giving it a unique essence which people yearn for. After Ultimate Custom Night, everyone believed the series had ended, and metaphorically, it did. But instead of ending it, Scott chose to continue expanding it. Knowing he's a single person, he brought in Steel Wool and Blumhouse Studios to grow it into what it is today. To be clear, none of the new games are necessarily bad. In fact, Help Wanted did a lot of things right. It's a fantastic game. Help Wanted was genuinely scary. It brought back the claustrophobia, the tension, and the fear of the original games. The ending was poetic. Spring Bonnie luring you in, a child, only to realize you've been stuffed into a suit. That moment was the core of the series. But Help Wanted introduced something new. It shifted how the series handled its villains and its lore. Littered throughout the game are tapes that shouldn't be put together, otherwise they activate a virus. This is where Glitch Trap is introduced. And this is the biggest turning point of the series. Glitch Trap is the virus version of the purple guy. While dying, his soul, or essence I guess, was scanned into circuit boards used to create the in-game Help Wanted. Or I think it's the Mimic program, I'm not really sure. So instead of a human killer or haunted animatronics, the main threat is an AI program or a virus. And this idea doesn't stop there. As we move into Security Breach, the animatronics are no longer haunted suits, they're just robots. The glam rocks aren't possessed, they're just humanoid machines. When we're introduced to Burn Trap, even that threat is still tied back to AI. And eventually, the main villain becomes the Mimic, another AI whose motivation is simply to replicate and kill. This marks a fundamental shift in what FNAF is about, and that shift isn't just limited to the story. Alongside lore changes, the gameplay changed too. Starting with Security Breach, FNAF became free roam. This has its upsides. The games are more accessible, they're available for a wider audience, there's more content and more exploration. But something important was lost. The challenge is no longer the focus. You're not surviving the game anymore, you're progressing through it. Instead of feeling like you're inside the experience, you're constantly reminded you're playing one. Interestingly, Help Wanted actually balanced this quite well, using movement without fully sacrificing tension. But with Security Breach, this balance was broken. So by this point, FNAF has changed in three major ways. From haunted animatronics to artificial intelligence, from restriction to free movement, from challenge-driven survival to story-driven progression, and none of these changes are automatically bad. But when you put them together, they begin to strip away the core elements that made FNAF work as horror in the first place. And that's where the real problems start. Now, what is actually wrong with the current essence of the series? Let's start with the environment. Security Breach is quite bright, it's massive, and it's open. That alone strips fear. There's just too much space, too much visible freedom. You're rarely ever trapped, and when you are, it's very brief. Even Ruin, which fixes the visuals with darker tones, decay, atmosphere, it still misses the mark. The animatronics are no longer a constant threat, they're replaced by an artificial bunny, glitches, and projections. In Secret of the Mimic, the environment is actually pretty great, but it still feels like a factory. Functional, busy, and alive. It's no longer eerie like the original games were. And moments of fears do exist, like the Nurse Dolly scene and the Tiger Rock basement scene, but these are isolated in a much larger game. And constant movement doesn't let fear breathe. In classic FNAF, you were sitting still the whole time. You listened, and this allowed you to notice the small details. But now, you're always moving forward. There's new rooms to explore, there's new visuals, there's new objectives. This caters to short attention spans, but it kills tension. As for the lore, this is the biggest issue. I want to be clear about something. A new story direction isn't the problem. FNAF didn't need to stay the same about the same characters or the same events forever. Evolution is necessary. The issue is that the new narrative removed something essential: motivation. The early games weren't scary because of what was happening. It was scary because why it was happening made sense. Early FNAF was about haunting. It was about dead children, their souls being trapped in metal, and a human killer whose presence loomed over everything. These were motivations you could understand. Now, the story has shifted to robots killing because they learn to, AI mimicking behavior, programs just following code, and machines replicating violence that they've seen. There's no emotional weight to that. A haunted child is tragic. A human killer is terrifying. But a robot doesn't feel fear, guilt, or pain. It just executes instructions. The Glamrocks, they talk, joke, express emotion. But in doing so, they stop being scary. They're likable, sometimes even friendly. Roxy and Glamrock Freddy, they stand out because they feel human. But that only proves a point. The horror is gone when the animatronics feel more alive than the threat itself. And worse, the story keeps rewriting itself. Now Edwin is the original animatronics engineer. Now David is the first victim. Now the mimic has existed way before. Every few months it's, "We were wrong for 8 years," or "This explains this mystery for 10 years. When everything can change at any moment, none of it feels meaningful anymore. Why should I care about the lore if it might be overturned again next time? Instead of building forward, the series keeps trying to recreate its origins. And that's why the lore feels so unstable now. The franchise has forgotten what it was. This doesn't even feel like Five Nights at Freddy's anymore. You're not even there for Five Nights. Freddy isn't even there in Secret Out of the Mimic. It's not even about haunted children. And the killer isn't present. It's just robots and AI programs walking around. And that matters because fear comes from relatability. You fear the children because they were human. You fear the killer because he was human. You understand their motivations. But a machine isn't evil or innocent. It doesn't choose, it just executes. There's nothing to connect to. And the movie makes it worse. Visually, the movie is fantastic. The sets are amazing, the animatronics are very detailed, and the atmosphere is all great. But the characters have no depth. Their motivations are shallow. Things happen just to move the plot forward. And the puppet possessing another human, that completely breaks the rules the series established for over a decade. FNAF is about souls haunting metal. Every single book, every single game follows this one rule. The only time a person is haunted is when it's their own soul. Like Michael Afton possessing his own body after he died. Haunting another human defeats the entire concept. It's not just a change, this contradicts the foundation that the series had built itself on. Overall, FNAF didn't lose its fear because it changed stories. It lost it because its characters stopped feeling like they had reasons to exist. So why did this happen? Why did all of this change occur? The answer is pretty simple. Most of the design decisions that reshaped FNAF weren't made because they deepened the horror or improved the experience. They were made to make the series more accessible, more marketable, and more profitable. And that's not really a conspiracy, that's just how large franchises work. Let's start with the gameplay and the environment. There's free roam, the difficulty is a lot lower, there's brighter visuals. These things naturally attract a larger audience, specifically the younger ones. They make the game easier to pick up, easier to finish, and easier to recommend. Steel Wool at the end of the day is just a studio. Studios have employees, they have budgets, and they have many expectations. Their goal isn't artistic purity, their goal is to be sustainable. And to be fair, they're not the villains. They made the ruined DLC free. They clearly do care about the franchise as they take the feedback that the community gives them. But the relationship between the game and its audience has changed. When FNAF was just Scott, he had complete creative creative control. He could take risks. He could be uncomfortable. He could alienate people if it served the vision. But now with a full studio involved, that freedom disappears. Now there are more people to please, there's publishers, platforms, parents, and a much younger audience. A brighter color palette makes the game more kid-friendly. Robot antagonists are easier to market than haunted children, and AI villains raise fewer eyebrows than murdered souls trapped in suits. None of this is by accident, and the same thing happened to this story. Constantly changing the lore keeps people talking. It fuels videos, theories, books, merchandise. The goal isn't always clarity, it's about engagement. More books, more collectibles, more content. FNAF launching on PlayStation, for example, wasn't a creative decision, it was a marketing one. And the movies follow the same logic. The FNAF movie makes this shift very obvious, specifically the second one. Visually, they're amazing. The sets, the atmosphere is well done, but narratively, they're shallow. They're packed with references, memes, and callbacks to just appease the fans. They're PG-13, so families can watch together. And that makes sense. Kids dominate the box office. Kids are easy to please, they're not really critical, and the franchise is leaning into that. And now we're already being pushed toward the next movie, not because the story needs it, but because the momentum does. So what can you do? Can you protest? Leave bad reviews? Stop engaging? Maybe. Will it change anything? Honestly, maybe not. But that doesn't mean you should just accept it. Accepting change is healthy. Accepting mediocrity isn't. FNAF didn't lose its identity because it evolved. It lost it because it chose what was easy over what was meaningful. FNAF can still be better. It just chose not to.